One King West Hotel in downtown Toronto. Welcome to the Empire Club of Canada once again. For those of you just joining us through either our webcast or our podcast, welcome to the meeting. Before our distinguished speakers are introduced today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our head table. I would ask that each of you at the head table rise when your name is called and then be seated. At this point, this is typically where the MC says, hold your applause to the end, but we don't operate like that at the Empire Club, so clap as much as you can for each and every guest. They're all worthy of your applause. So first we have Ms. Sheila Botting, partner and Canadian real estate and construction leader at Deloitte. Mr. Scott Addison, President, Brokerage Services, Canada, Colliers International. Ms. Toni Rossi, President, Real Estate Division of Infrastructure, Ontario. Mr. Michael Brooks, CEO of the Real Property Association of Canada. Ms. Antoinette Tumio, Director, Empire Club of Canada. Beside her is Mr. Peter Altobelli, General Manager and Vice President of Sales at Yardi Canada Limited. Another director at the Empire Club, Mr. Jim Medeiros, also CFO of Blue Sky Hotels and Resorts. Beside him is Mr. James Burton, Principal and Founder of Percy Ellis Holdings. Once again, my name is Paul Fogelin. In my day job, I'm the Vice President of the Ontario Retirement Communities Association and the President of the Empire Club of Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, your head table guests. I'm also pleased to say that we have a group of students from Centennial College. Where are our students today? There they are. A warm round of applause for Centennial College students. And a thank you to Brookfield Global Integrated Solutions for sponsoring our students today. So, the real estate industry, like many other industries, is evolving. And some would argue, however, that the evolution as it relates to diversity in the workplace and the overall culture is moving far too slow. Most of you here today are involved in some way, shape, or form in the real estate industry. While we have a very good-looking crowd today, I don't know if we'd say it reflects the true diversity of the City of Toronto. In truth, however, the story of diversity in the real estate industry is not all bad news. This afternoon, our expert panel is going to shine the spotlight on the notable progress that has been made to date. They will also provide their perspectives on why change has been so slow and what they and their organizations are doing to accelerate that change. With representatives from government, brokerage, owners, and the professional services sectors, we have all the bases covered for a very lively discussion. It's now my pleasure to introduce our panelists, and why don't you all join me on stage as I read your highly abbreviated biographies. We'd be here all day if I read their full accomplishments. They are available on our website for those who are interested. I'll moderate today. Sheila Botting is a partner and Canadian real estate and construction leader at Deloitte, as well as a member of Deloitte's Global Real Estate and Construction Executive. Sheila is responsible for Deloitte's full service offering to the real estate industry, which includes some 600 employees operating across 56 Canadian markets. She was also responsible for Deloitte's corporate real estate program and led to the transformation of the firm's office portfolio of almost 2 million square feet across Canada. Sheila has provided extensive real estate expertise to corporations, government, real estate companies, investors, pension funds, and others involved in the industry. Her vision and expertise have helped Deloitte to transform its workplace of the future, resulting in significant workplace improvements, productivity gains, and cost savings across Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, Sheila Botting. Scott Addison is President of Brokerage Services Canada of Colliers International and an active member of the commercial real estate industry for over 25 years. Scott executes the national brokerage business strategy throughout Canada. His focus is on both organic and strategic growth of Colliers. Strongly committed to client satisfaction, Scott fosters a culture of collaboration, service excellence, and market-leading project execution. Scott is dedicated to maintaining the Colliers brand as the best-in-class service provider, accelerating the successes of each and every Colliers client. Scott Addison. Besides Scott is Toni Rossi. Toni is the president of the Real Estate Division of Infrastructure Ontario. A 25-year commercial real estate professional, Ms. Rossi leads the planning, transactions, and overall management of the province of Ontario's 46 million square foot and 150,000 acre realty portfolio. Wow. And recently served as interim president and CEO. Ms. Rossi was a key member of the executive team merging the Ontario Realty Corporation and Infrastructure Ontario in 2011. Before joining the Crown Corporation, Toni was in development at Oxford Properties. The majority of her real estate career was with Cadillac Fairview, where Toni held many retail and office, property management, business reengineering, national operations, and market positions. Let's welcome Toni Rossi. And last but not least, we have Michael Brooks, the CEO of Real Property Association of Canada, the senior Canadian trade association for large public and institutional investment real estate companies. Michael is also an adjunct professor at the Ted Rogers School of Management and a former commercial real estate lawyer at Aird & Burles LLP. RealPAC represents the investment real estate industry in government relations, public relations, and standard setting. Michael has represented the Canadian real estate industry in all major policy initiatives with government at all levels. Michael is the author of Canadian Commercial Real Estate, Theory, Practice, and Strategy, the first national textbook of its kind in Canada. Let's welcome Michael Brooks and the rest of our panel. Sheila, I'll pass it over to you.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon for what I think is one of the most important conversations for the real estate industry. For those of us who have been in the industry for a long time, you recognize that this is truly an opportunity. So the format of our conversation is I'll kick it off, share some facts and stats, and then so on down the panel, and then we'll open it up for Q&A with everybody. So feel free to think of your most provocative question ever to ask our esteemed panelists, because they're dying to answer the tricky questions, and we hope to have a very engaging conversation. So to kick it off, what you don't know about me is that I have science degrees, several of them, focused on ecosystems. And when you do 6 years of science and you study, the evolution of the commercial real estate industry, you realize if you pay attention to Darwinian theory that monocultures tend not to do very well. And then in fact, diverse cultures can thrive and flourish. And when you think about that in a science perspective, it makes a lot of sense. Crops get wiped out when they're a monoculture, diverse cultures do really well. Then I've now come to Deloitte, where we talk about ecosystems every day of the week. It's shocking how suddenly ecosystems are one of the most important elements of what we do. And diversity in our ecosystem is absolutely crucial. And I've handed out this little book, so don't bother reading it till later, but just to give you some of the key facts. It's literally only been in the last, I'll say, 5 to 7 years that here in Canada we're starting to pay real close attention to diversity. Diversity at the board level, diversity at the most senior ranks of any kind of organization. And when you think about what the benefits of diversity are, and that is both of course, the male-female diversity along with cultural diversity. And I would add to it technical diversity. So whether you're a leasing person or a construction person or an asset manager, having that diversity of thought in any kind of decision-making, any kind of process provides for a much better high-performing organization, high-performing culture, high-performing workplace, and a place where employees are truly engaged. In the absence of that, in the absence of just all one single monoculture, you can't get the best of the organization. You can't engage people. You can't have a provocative dialogue about all kinds of outcomes. And so I worry that in commercial real estate, think about the nature of our business. We're largely order takers, right? We're waiting for the lease to happen. We're waiting for the tenant to tell something. We're waiting for the pension fund to tell us they want to sell an asset or to do whatever. And so when you layer that on to some of the more conservative natures of us as Canadians, you say, we really have to get out in front of this issue. So diversity is a really important conversation. It will drive productivity, profitability for your business. It'll drive employee engagement, and it will drive far better outcomes for everybody involved. So that's the base case. Tons of stats in here if anybody really wants to get at some of the stats and ask some of the questions. I'm going to turn it over to Scott Addison to talk about this within the most tricky of all sectors, and that is the commercial brokerage industry, and what that means to Colliers and to your own view.
Thank you, Sheila. I don't know if it's the trickiest of all sectors, but it has been challenging. And that's really what I want to talk about here. We know that as people go through change, one of the first elements of change is awareness. And at Colliers, we're acutely aware that our brokerage division doesn't have a lot of diversity. So I'm probably the black sheep up here on the audience up on the podium, and I'll acknowledge that. That doesn't mean our hearts and minds aren't fully supporting diversity and we want to get there. We've had quite a long history of trying to get more diverse. And diversity for us, we've really focused trying to change that male-female balance in our industry. And it has come with a lot of challenges and a lot of stories. And they may sound like excuses to some of you in the audience who, you know, it's easy, just mandate it, just change it. We found that change doesn't happen that way. And there's a number of changes going on. So we really started to focus in where we want to put change. You put a lot of focus in that area. Right now, our change is that male-female balance. And I've seen a lot of change in our company. We've gone from owned by the employees just 15 years ago to part of a publicly traded company to a publicly traded company just 2 years ago. And each one of those stages, as we've gone through it, has brought more clarity and transparency to things like diversity and, of course, EBITDA and profit and revenue growth. But diversity becomes part of it, and that's been a good process. So I think what you'll see is the publicly traded companies will lead diversity, especially as analysts start looking at how diverse is your workforce. And it is for all the reasons that Sheila just mentioned, diversity is a good thing. We recognize that. So saying that our hearts and minds are there, why hasn't it happened in the commercial real estate brokerage division? I want to be clear on that too. We have a lot of employees that are in a property management valuation. It's much more diverse culture. Brokerage. Well, first of all, the problem's sitting up here. Middle-aged, maybe older. White guy who's sports, loves sports, want to build a team of people that collaborate, work as a team. So despite the fact that I'm the father of 2 daughters, I have a mindset that subconsciously is looking for people that are good athletes and team athletes, heavily weighted towards males. And our management team across Canada in brokerage is a reflection of me. Why? When we look back at it, going back 20 years now that I've been somewhat involved in management, you tend to hire in your image because, hey, we're doing well, and we're doing well because of people like me. I know that's a little vain, but that's the reality of it. So we hired strictly from referrals, and we get referrals, and if they were the people referring them to us were like us, and we're interviewing. So there's a real bias there. How do you change that? Well, we've looked at that. We've changed our recruiting. 5 years ago, we stopped just hiring the sons and friends that were referred into the business, because very few people will refer their daughters into commercial brokerage because it's an old boys club. So how do you change that? We got much more proactive. We started going to the universities and talking about what are the advantages of being at commercial brokerage. And that made a change. So of our training program, and training is another component of it, training program went from less than 10% women to over 25% in the last 5 years. Big gain for us, big change. The problem was at the end of the training program, and the training program is really structured, we were still back around 10% women. A lot of them were getting, hired outside in that salary side. So we're a commission business. That's a challenge, Women are going to have children and have to take some time off for that. How do you do that in a commission business? So we're looking at things like moving to a salary base. We also realized, the problem's me with the hiring. How do we change that? So in the Our head of HR points out things like, if it's all white males hiring, that's what you're going to get. So we've started what we call a scouting program. 3 women across Canada. They go into the universities. They do the recruiting for us, and we're getting a much higher. Our ratio of people coming in for interviews, 9 men, 1 woman. And we've changed that dramatically in the last few years. That will change. Change isn't going to happen overnight, but we're working towards it. And it's a real challenge when the subconscious mindset's telling you something different. So just the honest, that's the honest answer. And it's not easy. I can't put hundreds of thousands of dollars into diversity because we've got accountants looking at EBITDA. I think that's a challenge with all the public companies. When the analysts start telling you part of their rating is diversity, it'll change.
So Scott, I think I probably would have made your team because I actually was a female athlete. So little known fact, I came through to the real estate. I came through to the real estate.
It's not too late to join either.
Brokerage, here we come. I came through the real estate industry. Similar to Sheila, I don't have a real estate background because at the time that we were going through university, there wasn't a lot of real estate programs. So just in general, I think our industry has come a long way in providing that from a perspective to university students to actually get into our industry. From my perspective, I'll talk a little bit about IO, but I'm really going to talk more broadly on the public sector or on the Crown corporations. And I think for us, there's 3 key things that we've been doing at IO, and I think the public sector's been doing fairly decently, that has addressed some of the topics and issues that both Scott and Sheila have talked about. And those 3 things are fairly simple, but difficult to execute. And we'll start with leadership. So if you want a change to occur, it has to be deliberate and intentional. So the right leadership makes the right changes, and I will give you a prime example. At IO, our board of directors started at probably a 20% female ratio to an 80% male ratio, and that was there, for years, for the last 10 years, easy. And there was a deliberate and intentional leadership change that said, we are going to recruit, go and find, we're going to headhunt some of the best women around, as well as the men. However, we really intentionally went out and found them. So leadership is key. And I will say, leadership starts with, we have a debate always on, do you need a quota or do you need a target? And the Ontario government and the federal government, from a public sector perspective, they put a target out there. They put a target out there for regulated OCS and companies, but they put a big target out there for Crown corporations, which was, by 2019, Crown corporations in Ontario must have 40% female representation. So that was a target, and IO, I'm proud to say, came to that target and has now a 50-50 split. But it's not just IO. Metrolinx has a 50-50 split, LCBO does, OLG. So if you start taking a look at Crown corporations, which are in essence kind of the hybrid of public sector and private sector, that is important, so leadership. The second key thing from my perspective that makes a change is data, data, data. You need to understand what you're talking about, so you need to actually get the data, you need to analyze the data, and then you need to report on it. So we at our board now, I always have my little handy-dandy little board show and tell, but we at our board now, we do demographic data. We talk about diversity at the board. We talk about the female-male split. We talk about who's getting promotions. We talk about who's leaving, why they're leaving. We talk about accessibility. We talk about who we're going to hire in, and we track it. And so, again, that's not been forever. That has been over the last number of months that we've now just started really focusing in and collecting. And then the last thing from my perspective that makes, an evolution of diversity, it really is workplace and work programs. And I think, Scott, you've kind of mentioned some of those programs, and we'll talk a little later about some of the other ones that we're probably all doing. But you need to have the workplace that allows you to welcome and be inclusive and have diversity of accessibility of people, but you also need to have the work programs that bring this kind of dialogue to bear. And then, because it's real estate, I can't stop but say, in real estate it's location, location, location. But for diversity, on these 3 things, it's repeat, repeat, repeat. Get the feedback, repeat it, refine. Get the feedback, repeat, get the feedback, repeat. So from I think an important segment of society, when you think about what has happened at the federal government and the prime ministers, because it's 2016, there's 50% cabinet representation, same at the provincial. We're a little bit less across the country on municipalities. There's about a 28% female ratio on councillors across the country, and today there's about 18% of mayors, whereas in Ontario our MPPs are at about 30% and federally a little higher. So, you know, ways to go.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody.
You can tell he's a teacher, right?
Come on, wake up.
Good afternoon, Mr. Brooks.
The chicken is in your stomach and it's digesting it. I'm really pleased to be here. Running a national association, this issue is something that's sat in my in tray for too long, but we have moved very quickly since Toni and Sheila stalked me at the real estate forum in November. Just kidding about that.
It's true.
For an hour we stopped.
For an hour.
So let me repeat Scott's biases. I have two daughters, both in the workforce. I want them to be economically independent through their whole life. And one of them's off the payroll. Get the other one off the payroll soon would be fantastic. A RealPAC national organization, big companies only, 92 members. We have 6 of our CEOs who are female, which actually isn't bad given some of the stats, and 7 if I count a COO. In terms of C-suite numbers, if I went down to the CFO level, that number would jump substantially. There are a number of CFOs of our member companies who are female. We had an HR summit last week with the Human Resource Professionals of Ontario co-branded event, and almost everybody in the room was female. So, you know, there are pockets where there's great penetration, but if you looked at acquisitions in our member companies, construction, you would see those numbers down quite a bit. In our organization, we currently have 10 employees, 7 female, 3 males, so minority. I think the why diversify piece has been pretty well covered by our group. Perhaps on the gender side, we know we need to get to 50-50 or parity. On the visible minorities and all of the other groups that we talk about, that's 20% of Canada as of the 2006 census data. It was actually a bit of a surprise to me that we are less diverse in Canada than they are in the US. Much bigger populations of diverse communities in the US. But having said that, that 20% number is probably 25 today. I teach at Ryerson. Before that, I taught at Schulich. My class are from every part of the world. A number of them, English as a second language, wanting to make a home here, wanting to contribute, love real assets. And to take a spin on what Toni said about location, 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 bricks are dead. It's people, people, people who make those bricks work. Who build the bricks, who rent the bricks out, who sell the bricks. It's all about people. It's always been about people in our industry. So what does a trade association do when it's late to the game and starting in this? Well, the first is data. We have amended our compensation study process. We do the biggest and the best annual compensation study in real estate in Canada. We've done it for 8 years with our colleagues from FBL who are here today. It's fantastic. For the first year, we are going to start gathering data on gender and on visible minority breakdown of the workforce in our industry, because right now we don't have sufficient data to make that case. We know at the C-suite that corporate Canada is around 20% female. We know the OSC has said 30% comply or explain. And even the 30% is probably a beginning number that we need to move up as we go forward. And there are a number of barriers. If you were to Google, go on our webpage, see all the member companies, Google the executive teams, you will see that it's still predominantly male. And how do we break that gap? How do we get more females up into the C-suite, and how do we get more females on the board? We're thinking about a number of programs. I have my board meeting tomorrow morning where I'm first going to pitch my board on our staff-generated diversity program, and All of my staff members who are involved in that program are here today. And we've looked around the world. What are other associations doing around the world? In the UK, just starting with their 2 major trade associations. NAREIT has a women-only initiative they've just started. Pension Real Estate Association in the US is more focused on visible minorities as their opening gambit, and they have a program they've had for 2 years on visible minorities. Australia is once again way ahead of us. They're way ahead of us on sustainability in real estate, and they seem to be way ahead of us on diversity. And there are a couple of great ideas that we're hoping to steal from them, and I'm presenting tomorrow. One is the panel pledge. All of our members are regularly on panels like this. The Australians have a panel pledge. No male member of that association will agree to sit on a panel or be part of a conference unless there's a female or someone, at least one female or someone from a visible minority on that panel. I should ask everybody in this room who does public speaking, every male in this room, to take the panel pledge. You may say, well, I got marketing objectives. I may have to, be up. You know what? It doesn't take much for you to push the organizer to have a woman on the panel. The other thing they've done is set a target on board diversity in Australia, 40-40-20 rule. 40% male, 40% female, 20% visible minorities or other, of either gender. So the 40-40-20 rule is actually very interesting because it identified, we focused on gender, and a lot of us have focused on gender as an opening gambit, but it allows us to reflect that 20% of Canadian population, which is visible minority. So gender is great, but we've got to quickly move past gender, and we've got to get on to all of the other elements as well. So there are other elements of our program that I'm pitching tomorrow at our board meeting, but that's our start.
So Sheila, just before you start, because Michael, you talked a little bit about the association and certainly taking a panel pledge. There's many associations out there, Toronto Crew, ULI, Women's Leadership Initiative. We have lots of great, women in infrastructure. We've got lots of great female associations who have and are promoting things like She with He. So pledging and doing that. Now, it's one thing for an association to take the pledge, but it's another thing to actually follow through on it. So what happens when that doesn't occur? What happens when there isn't? We've in the industry kind of referred to it as manels. They're no longer panels, they're actually manels. So what happens when somebody takes that panel pledge and you're on a manel? What do you do?
Good question. At the HR Summit, there are some WANLs last week. Is that a
Good.
word?
It's a WANLs. Got all female.
WANLs.
Yeah.
I just coined that word, WANLs.
Excuse me, what's a WANL?
It's all women, I'm sure. He was trying to get the manel WANL.
Yeah, I mean, to make it that will be an interesting discussion tomorrow because there is going to be some fear from the white male community. Let's get that out there. There's going to be some fear that this is kind of some kind of affirmative action. We're already seeing it on boards. So if you're a white male who is about to retire, who's looking for some board positions, and you go to talk to headhunters or the board chair, hey, I'd like a board position with your company, they're likely to say, sorry, but we've got to get to the 30% that the OSC has mandated. So you know what? We're looking for a female with accounting skills or compensation committee skills or HR skills because we need to gear up. So I think men are fearful of that affirmative action piece. So the panel pledge, I'm going to have an interesting discussion at my board tomorrow, and I'm probably going to have an interesting discussion at our retreat, bringing that up as well, because people will say, don't tie my hands.
So I'm going to pick up on that because it's as much about, forcing affirmative action versus this nice balance. I had the real privilege of listening to Mike Babcock yesterday. He was, of course, head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he was asked this question. He said, what do you do about diversity for all the great teams that you've worked on? He said, diversity, I don't really pay attention to it. It just happens. It's there. I've got women everywhere behind the scenes. On the ice, I don't care. It's about getting the best, most high-performance players and I create a safe environment for them. And it was really that safe environment piece that really connected with me, because if you create a safe environment, you create a high-performance team. The other piece of this is the war for talent. In 10 years from now, we'll have 75% of our workforce will be millennials and or Gen Zs.
Yep.
So that's what we're really chasing for. That group, the safe environment, how do we actually get out in front of it? So we're not going down affirmative action, so we actually can create this groundswell movement for change. What are some of the additional pieces we can take advantage of? Actually, Scott, I'm going to go to you on this one, because Scott's really got the hardest job in the room, I have to tell you this, having come from where you are. How do you start the baby steps and start kind of making that change take place in the brokerage world?
Yeah, so
the deal world, right? That's where we're from, deals.
So our world, the brokers will look at themselves as they're not waiting for a deal to come in, they're out hunting and killing is probably the words that they would use to describe it. So it's hard to change that mentality. And what we've learned over the years, and we've been to, I'm not bragging here, but I have been to Harvard to learn about change management. A 2-day course. just so we're clear, I've got the least education on it. But so you learn that change. Some people are excited and invigorated by change, and other people, feel fearful and are destabilized by change. So you've got to move the whole organization. There's 1,000 people in our brokerage. 439 of those are brokers. And how do you change those? Well, first of all, you do create the safe environment. And I talked about going from a privately owned company to part of a publicly traded company to a publicly traded company. About 10 years ago, we put in a hotline. And so if there's any disrespect in the workplace, there's a safe place you can go. So we did that, and it didn't have immediate change because maybe our managers weren't the fairest at adjudicating when a complaint came in. Don't worry about it. That'll go away. We've had to really stay close to that and create that safe workforce. You also have to articulate a vision, and I should probably have Sheila to come in and talk about why do you want diversity in the workplace for those managers and for the employees, economically and EBITDA-wise and revenue-wise. If we're excluding 50% of the population from a job at Colliers, we're excluding 50% of the smart people out there and the competitive people out there. So we recognize that. So you start doing your hiring different. We tried this scouting program. We are being much more proactive in going to universities and looking at outside and targeting who we want to go after, not just taking. So we're not going to get rid of all our top producers to bring a balance. So we have to have a 10-year, 15-year plan to bring that diversity. And that's how long it may take. But if you don't start, it doesn't happen. Your education has to be there. So part of our education, we've created within the Colliers Acceleration Program for new people, there's a training for women. It's called Taking the Stage, so they feel more confident in speaking in public and speaking in groups and speaking at meetings. And it's all around how do you get heard at the boardroom table or the meeting room table, and little things like that. And you just keep trying, and if it doesn't work, you go back and try something else. But you have to articulate that vision of where you want to go.
Toni, I'll talk to you. What about affirmative action versus setting the stage in the right directions? How do you calibrate that balance?
So it's an important debate because you just heard about my dialogue on quotas versus targets, but I actually think the target is the better way to go versus a quota, because quotas tend to create the wrong behavior. They tend to fill things for the reason of just filling. And so to me, and from experience, it is based on a target. So you understand what the need is. We're all here today because we realize that there is room for improvement, certainly on the gender parity, but beyond the gender parity, there's huge room for improvement from a visible minority perspective, from a diverse culture. So I like what Scott's saying as far as kind of creating a safe work environment for people to then aspire to do more. And you can do that through a couple of means. One is, from a target perspective, when you actually are transparent about your targets, when you're transparent about what the problem is, when you're transparent about what the gap is that you're trying to fill and the why. we would like to be a more diverse organization. Why? Well, because the perspectives are better for our bottom line, the perspectives are better for society, we actually get better work, we're working better with our clients in the industry and better with the private sector. That's what our dialogue would be. And you talked about taking the stage for women. Well, at IO, some of the programs that we are doing, again, are not gender specific only. So at IO, we have something called IO Speaks, which is Toastmasters. And what we are finding, it's not necessarily women that are coming in to learn how to be in front of a crowd. It's actually the ethnic minority. It is the visible minorities that are in there because they indeed are the ones that are in need, not in need, but they want to find a way to be in front of senior management, in front of those that are going to make some decisions. So to me, that's important. The other thing from a program perspective and just targeting, what does your company culture look like? What is it that you're trying to do and what do you care about? And again, I'll speak from an IO perspective. We do care about inclusion and diversity. We are nowhere near there yet. At the C-suite, we're 50-50 female. At the board, we're 50-50 female. At the C-suite, we have 20% visible minority. At the board, nothing. So that's a gap. But we also are trying to do things within our company that reflects our employees. So we have pride at IO. We're very big with the LGBT community. We have accessibility at IO. We've actually deliberately gone out and tried, and not that it's easy, we've truly tried to find individuals that we could hire. We've got two that are one now that is in a wheelchair. And what that did for us was huge. That changed our workplace. It changed how we actually interacted with each other because of how Anna interacted and how she needed to do from an accessibility perspective. So I think there's real opportunity, I think, Sheila, as you said, and that to me, forget about affirmative. I think we get targets, we find the gaps, you are transparent about them, and you fill them.
So here's a biggie where Michael's membership may go a little bit excited on this one. So what if you were to issue an RFP for the marketplace and say, you can bid on our space, you can bid on our brokerage, you can bid on our whatevers, but you've got to have diversity as part of your RFP submission, and clearly demonstrated. We've all done sustainability, so why not load in diversity to that? Toni, would you do that? Would that be a good opportunity?
What a great way to make a statement in the marketplace. So we've actually done very similar things from a diverse perspective on at IO, we do big, large infrastructure projects in all of our real estate. We're very prescriptive in what we need to do, and it is evaluated. And so I'm not going to say no to that, because I actually think we look at our teams.
It already
so
exists.
Tell
Look,
us
you know what?
It's
in law, which is my background. That's 5 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, I got questionnaires 5
Right.
years ago from major clients.
Right.
What's your law firm total lawyer? What's the female head count, male head count, visible minorities? And that's part of their service selection process. So I think the professions are way ahead of real estate. I think law's way ahead. I think accounting's way ahead. I think the big banks are way ahead. Look at RBC's program. It's a deep and well thought out program. So that already happened. So there's the ability of our members, our 92 members, to affect changes, to send a questionnaire to your major suppliers. Ask the suppliers to disclose what is their breakdown, male, female, visible minorities. That would be game-changing in real estate.
That would be huge. Could you see responding to that? Do you collect those stats today?
Do we collect? We don't collect on visible minorities. It's a pretty good indication of how many females we have in brokerage, around 12%. And there's safety in numbers, because we look at our competitors and go, well, we're doing pretty well. And that leads to that complacency that doesn't drive change, because you think we're as good as the competition, business is going well. So, but I can tell you, we are addicted to winning. And so if part of winning is that diversity comes in the RFP, things will change. We're addicted to winning. So.
We have some really smart people that I work with, monitor Deloitte. They have this whole thing called how to play, where to win. Really big topic, and this is a big one. We've got the mics going around the room. I'm sure you're all just dying to ask some questions of our panel. So feel free. Anybody? Keith. So Keith Labette is one of the large executive recruiters in the industry, and I'm sure that you've got a really interesting perspective when it comes to either boards and or the C-suite. So yes, please.
Wonder what you mean about big, but yeah, Keith Labette with DHR International Executive Search. And Sheila, you'll agree that since we started working a little while ago together, looking around this room, the industry's come a long way. And I've had the pleasure of working with most of you on the board and all of your organizations, and I know you do a great job. Just a couple of thoughts. Toni, you've touched on these points a couple of times. Have you utilized recruiting firms with dedicated diversity practices to add to your ecosystems? And then a second part of the question where we've had some success at DHR is, are you targeting specific functional areas for diversity?
So yes and yes. I mean, in case in point, we, from the board level on down, we certainly started with leadership, and so we utilized recruit firms and search firms to get the diversity needs that we needed. After a skills matrix, most boards talk on governance first, and you find out your gaps and you find out what you need, and then targeted and really went out and found some of those right individuals. And then yes, on the diversity, and I think I spoke about Anna. We've been and we're not great yet. We're certainly not near, but we actually have started to go to different groups and associations on how to bring people into IO that normally don't come into this kind of setting, those with accessibility needs or diversity. So yes, and yes, and I think it's imperative because we can't do it on our own. Like our company is very good at the competencies that we are very good at, and our HR team is fantastic. But there are great organizations that do things for a living better, so we take advantage of that best-in-class knowledge.
Everybody's really shy out there. Is it? Oh, we've got a question. Yes, sir, down the end. We need a mic over there too. This is a tough topic, right? It's a really tricky one for our industry, and so having the conversation is a great starting point to the topic. Yes, please.
My name is Chandran Fernando from Matrix. We actually specialize in the recruitment of diversity talent for the corporate real estate market across Canada. So when it comes down to the nuts and bolts of real estate is all about communities, correct? Mm-hmm. So if we're reflecting real estate to be Canada, what are you in the last 6 months, 3 months? I understand, Michael, you're proposing something to your board. I know, Toni, what you're doing, and thank you for that. I would like to understand why now. I understand it's good for business, but what is the practical solution for businesses so that we're not focused on our biases, such as affirmative action? Because affirmative action, we know it doesn't work, and that's an excuse to hide guilt and blame. So when it comes down to the overall function of human behavior, you, 4 individuals here who are great leaders in the real estate industry, what are you doing now in your current day-to-day action in regards to understanding your biases, and what are you doing to train that within your internal teams and on a corporate level? Because that's where you need to start.
I'll take that one on first. So I was at Cushman & Wakefield before I joined Deloitte, and within Cushman, I think I had one of the most diverse teams in the entire marketplace. Now at Deloitte, of the 25 people in my immediate team, I think there are 70% that would be either gender diverse or culturally diverse. So we live, breathe, and die by that. And for any of you who know about Deloitte, we now have 4,600 people at our Bay Adelaide facility who do not have dedicated seating. It's all about inclusion and inclusive design. So our CEO, right down to the most junior analyst, has the same entitlements in our space. So it's taking it off the stratosphere to somewhere different. But what an amazing place to work. Like, what an amazing experience to have all of those people coming together. So for me, it's completely energizing. It's a tremendous opportunity for our industry. So I hope that answers your question from a Deloitte perspective. On to you, Scott.
On to me. We're firm believers. Everything you can measure, you can change. So you really have to know the data behind it. And so 7 or 8 years ago, we started tracking through Aon Hewitt, our employee engagement score, that has scores in there for diversity, and we've been moving that up steadily to last year we were able to win a gold employer. We believe in transparency too, so when you measure something, you let everybody know where it is. So if we truly, and I was thinking of this up on stage, we're not doing it yet, but I think it's a good policy we should look at. If we want diversity in our business, right now the managers are all rated on things like the usage of our CRM system, EBITDA, their Aon Hewitt score in their individual office, their Net Promoter Score, which is a service score, and it's all transparent. Every manager can see it across Canada. And we are a competitive group, so we set targets. We're not going to tell people that they have to get there, but we set targets for people to get there. And we find because they're a competitive group, the transparency of seeing the rankings, nobody wants to be on the bottom, so the bottom moves up, which pushes the top up.
Correct.
So that's one of the tactics we're taking to move it up. Just make sure that everybody's. Oh, and I said the first stage of change is awareness. So you have to make people aware of what the situation in their office is and get them out of that comfort zone of I'm just as good as any other office around here across Canada for Colliers or in our industry. So.
1 minute. Want to say anything, Toni?
I mean, probably that's been said, but the only other thing that I would add is in the last 3 to 6 months, we've put into play succession and performance management tools. And I think that's the key to kind of what you were talking about, Scott. It's a different way of looking at what we are, in fact, rewarding and how we are rewarding that to be able to tackle that unconscious bias that you were talking about, because I think that's really the crux of it. And, you know, you just heard Michael talk about what Sheila and I have been doing for the last 6 months is chirping in his ear. So I think here we are. We're having an open dialogue now, so that's the other thing that we're doing.
Yeah, and I would accept your challenge. I think what you said was very true, unconscious bias. Scott's really talked about it in his shop, and it's a challenge for me. I'm taking it up, and I'm in the business of change management, and it's on my list.
Can you use the microphone? Sorry.
So in regards to being on our list, at the end of the day, so the whole civil rights movements happened in the 60s. 50 years later, we're still talking about what we started 60 years ago with the women's movement, the color movement, the immigration movement in the 80s, and now it's again reapproaching it again. What are the real, at the end of the day, it's great it's on your list, one of the many things on your list. I understand that as a business. I get that. But when it comes to leadership, what Toni mentioned, it has to be explicit. It has to say, it has to come from the top and the bottom, because it's both. It's a re-education of the mind, and it's through bias training. So have any of your organizations, through the HR component or the leadership training program, actually have done in the last 24 months a program for explicit and implicit biases?
Right.
That's the starting point, I think.
Yeah.
I will say that our HR department and the senior management teams work hard at coaching of our managers, and part of that coaching, one of the big things is the nature of our industry is it's hard to tell a commission salesperson what to do, so you have to coach them. That coaching is all about awareness and listening, and so you have to be listening, and then that's when you're self-aware and you're listening, that's when you start realizing I have a bias. I'm actually holding this person back, or I'm holding this program back. So I would say we've been very intensive in that over the last 5 years, really ramping it up over the last 2. So we've looked at that, and you know, I'm not going to take discredit for the last 50, 60 years that you talked about, because I know I'm old, but I'm not that old. And you know, in context, Colliers, just 6 years ago, I couldn't tell you how many employees we had in the brokerage division. I couldn't tell you how many were licensed and unlicensed, let alone how many were male and female. So the age of great data is we're just really getting into that. We've had computers for 30 years, but they haven't really helped us analyze things instantly. And through software like Microsoft's business intelligence software, you're starting to see that. I'm not comfortable with, I don't know our ethnic diversity I don't know if we ever checked that. I don't even know if I can go through and check that, to be honest. But if we had that data, we can improve it. That's my belief. If you have the data, you can improve it. So 60 years ago, I didn't have that data. 5 years ago, I didn't have it. We have had a diversity program at Colliers North America-wide for about 4.5 years. So from the data perspective, that's where it started showing up. Oh, we've got a. It's not just a perceived problem. We have a real problem here. Yeah. We have to change it.
So this is a really important conversation for our industry. For those of us in the room, I think by coming here today, you showed how important it is. And certainly for those of us on the panel, and poor Scott, because he represents all of the brokerage industry, which we know that we have a change. So you're very brave to come, very brave to come. And Michael, also very brave to take the challenge that Toni and I issued to you to change it from the top of the house. For any of you, if you have ideas, thoughts, send emails to any of us. We are now engaged. We're now passionate about this subject. And it really is the war for talent, the war for people, the war for engagement, and the war for opportunity for our industry. So thank you for joining. I'd like to turn it back over for the formal conclusion.
And Sheila, I think you and I are brave as well for sitting up here and actually kind of creating the dialogue.
Let's give a warm round of applause for our fantastic panel. As Sheila said, this is in some ways the beginning of a conversation that's going to continue over time. I certainly learned a lot today. I like to quote Michael, bricks are dead, it's people, people, people. And I certainly don't want to be on a sporting field across from Toni. It's my pleasure to welcome Peter from Yardi to deliver our official thank you to our panel.
Well, I've been asked to thank our esteemed panel, and it's a lot to prepare for when you have to speak on a regular basis, and preparing for these types of events takes time and energy and getting your information together. And I wanted to extend a thank you to all our panelists for providing this type of discussion and this type of conversation. It can get very political. It can become very diversified. I know as an organization, we're an international company, and when I have senior executives come over from different parts of the world that are in the Yardi offices, they often say to me, it's so diversified, and I tell them that we are a reflection of the city of Toronto. The diversity for us is grown, it's not thought of, it's done every day. And it's great to see that this is now coming through this entire real estate industry. So to all of you, thank you very much for your preparation and contributions this afternoon. Thank you.
Just a few more housekeeping items. Again, I'd like to really give a warm thank you to our sponsor, Yardi, as well as our VIP sponsor, Quadrille Property Group. We're a not-for-profit organization. Where's Quadrille represented? Thank you.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, we're a not-for-profit organization. We simply couldn't host lunches like these, especially these sorts of conversations without our sponsors, so thank you. I'd also like to thank the National Post, who is our print media sponsor, and MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online event space for live broadcasting this webcast. We often get hundreds of viewers at home, and in fact around the world. For some reason, Germany seems to love watching our events. Fun fact. And although our club has been around since 1903, we have moved into the 21st century, and we're very active on social media. So please follow us on Twitter at @empire_club. I understand we also have a Snapchat account. I don't have one personally, but apparently ours is pretty fantastic. And finally, please join us for our next event on June the 19th here at 1 King West. We have Minister Michael Chan, who's the Minister of International Trade, and it is our last lunch of the season. So thank you so much for coming and joining us today for this conversation. I hope you had a wonderful time, and we'll see you next time.